I'm back here to my hourglass, and I've already done something with levels. I've already kind of really changed the contrast and added a lot of brightness to my photo. So when it comes to exposure, any little movement is going to really make it look over processed. So I'm just going to do a very small adjustment and maybe add a little bit of gamma so my midtones can get a little lighter, and that's it. And I don't use these adjustments for every single photo. There might be just 2 or 3 that I use per photo. The next one on the list is vibrance. So we're going to click right here on vibrance, and it's going to allow us to add vibrance and saturation. So let's say we have this flower, and let's go ahead and zoom in on it, and we really want to bring out more of the color. We can go to saturation and quickly add color and more saturation to all of the hues quickly by sliding it to the right. So now it really pops out. It's highly saturated colors. It just takes the original hue of a pixel and moves it all the way higher to a higher saturation. You can also desaturate something really quickly by sliding it all the way to the left. You're taking away all the saturation from every hue and every pixel. And so what this does is this saturates every pixel in the photo, just everything. So what happens if you oversaturate? It can look overprocessed. What vibrance does is it doesn't select every single pixel, but just the ones that are already bright to begin with. So it's not going to do every single pixel in the photo, just ones that are already have a little bit of saturation to them, and it just makes them more saturated. So it's more selective. If I were to increase vibrance all the way, see what that looks like compared to saturation. So if I increase the saturation, it does look overprocessed. What it's going to do, it's going to add saturation to every single thing, even these that don't originally had saturation. And this will add saturation to selected things that already had a little bit of saturation. So it's more selective. It's a little bit easier to use. Just wanted to talk about the difference. A lot of times, to be honest, as a graphic designer, we have to do a lot of quick editing for projects. A lot of times you just kind of get used to what works. In the past for certain things, you just kind of do a slider real quick. Yes, I like that. Slide that a little bit. Yes, I like that. And you click OK. There's a science to every one of these, but there's also what looks good, what is looking good to your eye. And that's kind of more of a casual way to edit. Don't get overwhelmed or burdened by choosing everything, learning all these technical behind the scenes, what's going on to the pixels. Just experiment with each one of these. Find your favorites. Get used to kind of points that you like to slide it to. A lot of time, I've done this for so many years, you end up opening a photo and you go, yes, I need to increase the vibrance. I need to maybe bring out, use levels and kind of lighten it. I need to change the brightness and contrast a little bit, and that's it. And you just kind of, you open a photo and you just kind of learn like exercising a muscle. You kind of have muscle memory when it comes to what these things, how these adjustments affects photos. All right, so we're back to our hourglass. I have vibrance selected. I really want to bring out this blue in the hourglass. I want that to become more saturated and higher, rich blue color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the saturation. And you'll notice it did every single pixel. Well, it's doing this gold and making it look a little overdone. So let's try vibrance. I just want to add a little pop to the colors. I think that looks a little bit more reasonable. So now we get to go to hue and saturation. So this is a quick way to change the hue on an entire photo. So we have a hue slider. So right now this is kind of in a neutral position, but if I were to add to the hue, it kind of goes along this color scale. So it's kind of slowly changing colors. You get a pretty wide range of colors as you move it across. Same thing goes if I go back to neutral and I do negative hue, it'll go down and do a wide range of color. So it's a great way to kind of do a very quick dramatic shift in color. And you also have a saturation option slider here as well. And then a lightness, which will just kind of do an overall light or bright. This is one I use often. This is a big one along with brightness and contrast that I use the most often. What's really neat about this is you can click on colorize right down here. This little box, going to go ahead and tick colorize. And what I can do is I can do a quick color change that's kind of monochromatic. So it's just all one color. And I can slide it along the hue slider all the way to 360, which is basically the entire color wheel. So you can kind of slide it all along. It's going to do the full hue, full saturation, go all the way to full saturation. It's going to make it really crazy. So you don't have to do all the way full saturation. Let's do kind of a little bit in the middle. And you could do a quick color change just by ticking the colorize box. So let's say I wanted to change it from kind of gold to maybe a little bit more warm tones, maybe a tiny bit more like copper. I could just slide this to the left, and it just makes a small adjustment. I mean, you don't want to go too far, then it starts to look brown, but just kind of a slight move to the left. And if I don't like any of these, or I want to see what's the final effect and go back to how I had it before, you can toggle off any one of these adjustment layers to kind of figure out which one you think has a good effect or a bad effect. So now color balance. Color balance allows us to do what we did before, but do it more selectively. So we have the cyan to red, magenta to green, and yellow to blue. These are opposites on the color wheel, so we can slide this. So let's say I have this kind of cyan blue color. I happen to have that in my Hourglass. I'm going to slide it over to red. It's going to add a little bit of red tones. I could do the opposite, and it's going to add a little bit of cyan to the whole photo. And this is not at all selective, it just does the entire document. So let's say I feel like it has some yellow undertones that I don't like, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit of blue to counter that. I can go down to this yellow blue slider and I can add a little blue. Just a little bit. So notice how it went from, you have like yellow, kind of looks like too many yellow undertones. And now we can just add a little bit of blue. And what makes this a little bit more complicated is that was just midtones. Those were all the midtone pixels in the document. We also have shadows, which are your darker colors, and highlights, which are your lighter. So you can change the highlights in the same way. So I'm going to bring in another photo so I can I use this a lot, and I just want to kind of show you what it looks like on a person. So I have a new photo here, and I just wanted to demonstrate color balance. So let's say there's a lot of warm tones, and I want to and what's kind of been in the last couple years is adding more cooler tones to photography. So what I want to do is add a little bit of blue, and I'm just right here default on the midtones, and I'm just going to slide it to blue a little bit. And it's going to take a lot of that yellowness away, so that's kind of what it was before. Just adds a little blue, very small change. So that's kind of before and then after. Now that's just midtones. You can also continue to do shadows in the same way, and then highlights. And some photos naturally have maybe some green undertones that aren't really good for skin. So you can kind of add a little warmth by taking away green and adding a little bit of magenta. So just small changes that you can do. I can go back to my history panel, which is right over here. I can go back to before and then after. And the only thing I used was the color balance adjustments. So before and after. So back to our Hourglass, we can continue to take away those yellows and add a little bit of blue. Midtones, let's do it with highlights. Maybe not highlights, because it's kind of changing the lighter pixels, and I don't want that wall to look blue. So we don't have to change that. But let's change some of the shadows, add a little blue, just a tiny bit. You don't want it to look super blue. Just very small changes, which is all adjustments are about, of those little changes that add up. So black and white, this one's pretty self-explanatory. What's great about black and white is you have control over previously colored pixels in the image. So it has the reds, yellows, greens, and cyans. So any pixels that used to be red, you can change them here. And what's great is it gives you individual control over all these different colors so that you can kind of do the black and white your own way. So we can make this almost look white, like white sand. And this is why it's having an effect on just the sand, because it was blue, it was cyan. So now we're taking away cyan and it turns black. We're able to kind of isolate and select that one color. And we didn't have a whole lot of magenta. So you notice how as I slide it, you're not seeing big changes because there wasn't a lot of magenta in this photo. So it gives you lots of control. Instead of just doing black and white, you can kind of make adjustments so that I think this just works a little bit better. You can even add a quick tint by ticking the tint box. You can add some sepia or add blues on your hue slider. So you can add a slight tint to that if you'd like. But I don't want to do black and white for this, so I'm simply going to take my black and white and drag it in the trash. So now we're going to do photo filter. So we're going to click on photo filter, and this is a super quick way to kind of add an overall color, warmer, cooler tones to your photo. They have a bunch of built-in filters that you can click, and you have warming filters. They have cooling filters, which is going to bring in kind of your cooler colors. You can change the density, which is basically it changes kind of the intensity, I guess you could say, of the effect of it. So you can have it 100%. Go back to warming filter, it kind of had the orange color, or you can have it just be a very small change. I'm going to bring in another photo to demonstrate this in action. So I downloaded this landscape image from pexels.com, and what I really find photo filters great for is it's a quick way to make a photo look like it's possibly an evening or kind of changing the time of day. So just a quick warming filter, which is going to add kind of an orange color. You can also select the color and change it, so you're not stuck with whatever is on these filters. You can do more than that. You can click on the color and adjust it, making it a different shade. So let's say I want to change the density, and it'll look a little bit more like an evening shot than it does a noon shot. So just kind of adding a little bit of color here. So let's do before. Let's go ahead and toggle on and off. So that's kind of looks like it's maybe taken at 4 o'clock or maybe in the morning. And this just kind of adds a little bit. It's just something kind of really, really quick that you can do to a photo to add just almost like a little filter on top in terms of color.